The morning they fined me $600 for fishing in my own backyard was the morning I decided to buy an entire lake. My name is Michael Torres, and I've lived in the Pine Valley community for 23 years. My house sits right on the edge of Crystal Lake pristine, 20-acre body of water. That's been the centerpiece of our neighborhood since the development was built back in 1998. Every morning, I wake up to the sound of ducks gliding across the water. Every evening, I watch the sunset paint the lake in shades of orange and gold. And every weekend for the past 2 decades, I've taken my little fishing boat out onto that lake to catch bass, catching my dinner and finding my peace. Fishing wasn't just a hobby for me, it was therapy. After my wife Linda passed away 7 years ago from cancer, that lake became my sanctuary. The gentle rocking of the boat, the patience required to wait for a bite, the satisfaction of reeling in a good catch, these simple pleasures kept me sane through the darkest period of my life. My daughter Emma, who lives 3 states away in Colorado with her husband and 2 kids, always tells me she's glad I have the lake. She says it keeps me from being lonely. But that Saturday morning in late April of 2024, everything changed. It was 6:15 in the morning when I pushed my boat away from the small dock behind my house. The air was crisp, probably around 55 degrees, and a light mist hovered over the water like a ghostly blanket. Perfect fishing weather. I'd made myself a thermos of black coffee, the strong stuff that could wake the dead, and packed a small cooler with some sandwiches and water. I planned to stay out until at least noon. The lake was completely still. No other boats, no joggers on the path that circles the water, no signs of life except for a family of geese in the far corner and a blue heron standing motionless near the reeds. This was my favorite time before the world woke up, before the noise and chaos of daily life intruded on this perfect moment of solitude. I rowed out to my usual spot, about 200 yards from shore, where the water was deeper and the fish were bigger. I'd been fishing this exact location for so many years that I could probably navigate to it blindfolded. I set up my rod, baited the hook with a fresh night crawler I'd dug up from my garden the night before, and cast my line into the dark water. For the first hour, nothing happened. That was normal. Fishing requires patience, and I had plenty of it. I sipped my coffee, watched the mist slowly lift as the sun climbed higher, and let my mind wander. I thought about Linda, about how much she would have loved this peaceful morning. I thought about Emma and the kids, my grandsons, Jake and Tyler, who are now 8 and 10 years old. I made a mental note to call them later. Then, at exactly 7:32, remember checking my watch, I felt it, a strong, sudden tug on my line that nearly yanked the rod out of my hands. My heart immediately started pounding. This was a big one. For the next 25 minutes, I battled that fish. It was powerful, diving deep and then surging toward the surface, running left and then right, using every trick in the book to break free. My arms, sweat dripped down my forehead despite the cool morning air. But I wasn't about to give up. This was the fight every fisherman dreams of. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I managed to bring the fish alongside the boat. It was magnificent, a largemouth bass that had to be at least 12 pounds, maybe even 13 or 14. Its dark green scales shimmered in the sunlight, and its mouth was wide enough to swallow a softball. This was easily the biggest fish I'd caught in 5 years, maybe longer. I carefully netted the fish and brought it into the boat. My hands were shaking, partly from exhaustion, partly from pure adrenaline and excitement. I took a moment to admire it, then gently placed it in my cooler with some ice. Tonight, I would have an incredible dinner. Maybe I'd even call Emma and tell her about the catch. She always loved hearing my fishing stories, even if she teased me about being obsessed. I was so focused on the fish that I didn't notice someone was watching me from the shore. But as I looked up, wiping the sweat from my brow, I saw a figure standing on the path near the lake's edge, about 100 yards away. Even from that distance, I could tell who it was. The perfectly coiffed, blonde hair, the designer athletic wear that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill, the unmistakable posture of someone who thought they owned the place. Karen Henderson. Karen was 57 years old, though she'd never admit it. She'd moved into Pine Valley about 8 years ago with her husband Gerald, a retired accountant who barely spoke above a whisper, probably because Karen never gave him a chance. She was the self-appointed guardian of community standards, the woman who complained about everything from slightly overgrown lawns to garbage. Karen's left out 15 minutes past the designated pickup time, but Karen's biggest obsession was my house. She lived 4 houses down from me, in a beautiful colonial-style home that was actually bigger than mine, but her view of the lake was partially blocked by trees and other houses. My house, on the other hand, had the prime location, direct lakefront, unobstructed views, and private access to the water. Karen had tried to buy my house twice. The first time was about 5 years ago when she offered me $300,000. I politely declined. The second time was 2 years ago, and she increased her offer to $350,000. I declined again, less politely. Since then, Karen had made it her personal mission to make my life difficult. She'd complained about my lawn being half an inch too long. She'd reported me for having my recycling bin out on the wrong day even, though it was actually the correct day. She'd even tried to get the HOA to force me to repaint my house because she claimed Ticolor was inconsistent with neighborhood aesthetics, despite the fact that my house had been this color since 19... I watched as Karen pulled out her phone and appeared to be taking pictures or maybe even video of me in my boat. Then she pulled out a small notebook. Always carried that thing and started writing something down. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. Karen was up to something. I tried to ignore her and enjoy the rest of my morning on the lake, but the moment was ruined. I reeled in my line, started the small electric motor on my boat, and headed back to my dock. As I secured the boat and carried my cooler up to my house, I noticed Karen was still there, still watching, still writing in that damned notebook. I gave her a friendly wave. She didn't wave back. Instead, she snapped her notebook shut, turned on her heel, and marched away down the path. Something was definitely wrong. That evening, after I'd cleaned and cooked, my magnificent basset was as delicious as I'd hoped. I tried to forget about Karen. I watched some baseball on TV, read a few chapters of a mystery novel I'd been working through, and went to bed around 10:30. But I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that something bad was coming. Primera gua. Es right. Sunday passed without incident. Monday was a normal workday. I am a freelance graphic designer, so I work from home, which is another reason I love living on the lake. Tuesday morning, when I went out to get my mail around 11 o'clock, I found an official-looking envelope from the Pine Valley Homeowners Association. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it. Inside was a formal letter, typed on official HOA letterhead, dated the previous Friday of the day before my fishing trip. Dear Mr. Torres, this letter serves as official notice that a new community regulation was approved during the April 10, 2024 HOA meeting, effective immediately. All residents who wish to engage in fishing activities on Crystal Lake must obtain a permit from the HOA office. This permit requires a processing fee of $75 and must be renewed annually. Our records indicate that you were observed fishing on Crystal Lake on April 20th without the required permit. As per the new regulation, this violation carries a fine of $600, payable within 14 days of this notice. Please contact our office to arrange payment and discuss the permit application process. Sincerely, Barbara Mitchell, HOA President. I read the letter 3 times, each time feeling more outraged. $600 for fishing in a lake I'd been fishing in for 23 years. This was insane. I immediately called the HOA office. The phone rang 4 times before someone picked up. Pine Valley HOA. This is Denise speaking. Denise, this is Michael Torres. I need to speak with Barbara Mitchell immediately. I'm sorry, Mr. Torres, but Mrs. Mitchell is in a meeting right now. Can I take a message? This can't wait. I just received a fine for $600, and I need to discuss it with her right away. There was a pause. Hold on, please. I waited for what felt like 10 minutes, but was probably only 2 or 3. Finally, Barbara's voice came on the line. Michael, hello. I assume you're calling about the fishing permit violation. You're damn right I am. Barbara, what the hell is this? I've been fishing in this lake since I moved here in 2001. Now suddenly I need a permit. Barbara sighed. She sounded tired. I know, Michael, and I'm sorry, but this was passed by the HOA board. It was brought up during our April meeting. I didn't know there was an April meeting. Nobody told me. We sent out email notifications to all residents 2 weeks in advance, as per our bylaw. Let me check. Yes, the notification was sent to your email address on file on March 27th. I grabbed my laptop and quickly checked my email. Sure enough, buried in my spam folder, there it was, an email from the HOA about the April 10th meeting. I must have missed it among the dozens of junk emails I get every day. Okay, fine. I missed the email, I admitted. But who the hell proposed this ridiculous rule? And why? Another pause. The proposal came from Karen Henderson. Of course it did. Baba, you know this is targeted at me. Karen has been trying to make my life miserable ever since I refused to sell her my house. I understand your frustration, Michael. I really do. But the proposal was voted on and approved by the board. 5 members voted in favor, 2 voted against. It's now an official regulation. Can I appeal it? You can submit a formal appeal to the board. Yes. But I have to be honest with you, appeals rarely overturn decisions that were made by majority vote. Your best option is probably to pay the fine and get the permit for next year. $600 for doing something I'd been doing peacefully for over 2 decades. This was extortion. Barbara, can I ask you something? Who owns Crystal Lake? The question seemed to surprise her. Who owns it? Well, it's private property. The lake and the land around it are owned by Harold Cunningham. He's the original developer who built Pine Valley. He's quite elderly now, I think. He's in his late 80s. He lives in a retirement community in Hillsborough now, about 45 minutes from here. Do you have his contact information? I have his phone number in our files. Why do you want to contact Mr. Cunningham? Just curious, I said. Can you give me his number? Barbara hesitated for a moment, then gave me the number. We said our goodbyes and hung up. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the phone number I'd written down. A crazy idea was forming in my mind. It was ridiculous, expensive, and probably completely impractical. But the more I thought about it, the more it appealed to me. If I owned the lake, Karen's stupid rules wouldn't apply to me. I could fish whenever I wanted. No permits, no fees, no HOA bureaucracy. I picked up the phone and dialed Harold Cunningham's number. A woman answered. Hillsborough Senior Living. How may I help you? Hello. I'm trying to reach Harold Cunningham. Is he available? May I ask who's calling? My name is Michael Torres. I live in Pine Valley, the community Mr. Cunningham developed. One moment, please. I waited, listening to soft classical music playing in the background. After about 90 seconds, an elderly male voice came on the line. Hello. This is Harold Cunningham, Mr. Cunningham. My name is Michael Torres. I live in Pine Valley, right on Crystal Lake. I hope I'm not disturbing you. Pine Valley? My goodness, I haven't thought about that place in years. How is it? How's the lake? His voice was warm and friendly, with a slight tremor that comes with age, but still strong and clear. The lake is beautiful, sir. I've been living here for 23 years, and I've spent countless hours fishing on it. It's a wonderful place. Fishing. Oh, I used to love fishing on that lake. Back in the day, before I sold the lots and built the houses, I'd go out there every weekend. Caught some real beauties. Do you catch much? I do, sir. In fact, I caught a 12-pound bass just last Saturday. 12 pounds. My goodness. That's a trophy fish. You must be quite the fisherman. I try my best, sir. Mr. Cunningham. I'm calling because I wanted to ask you about the lake. I understand you still own it. That's right. When I developed Pine Valley, I kept ownership of the lake and the surrounding land. I always thought maybe someday I'd go back there, build a little cabin, spend my retirement fishing. But ... single quotes, and I heard a sad sigh. Well, life doesn't always work out the way you plan. My wife Margaret passed away 10 years ago, and my health isn't what it used to be. I'm 87 now. I'll never make it back to that lake. I'm very sorry for your loss, sir. Thank you, young man. Now, I assume you didn't call just to chat about fishing. What can I do for you? I took a deep breath. Mr. Cunningham, I'd like to buy Crystal Lake from you. Silence on the other end of the line. For a moment, I thought he'd hung up. You want to buy the lake? He finally said. Yes, sir. The entire thing. I'm serious. May I ask why? I explained the situation of the new HOA rule. The $600 fine, Karen's vendetta against me. Harold listened without interrupting. When I finished, he chuckled. So you want to buy an entire lake to avoid a fishing permit? That's either the most stubborn thing I've ever heard or the most brilliant. Maybe both, sir. He chuckled again. Well, Michael, I'll tell you what. That lake has been sitting in my estate for years. My children have no interest in it. They all live in different states, and none of them have any connection to Pine Valley. I've thought about selling it before, but I never got around to it. If you're serious about this, I'd be willing to discuss it. I'm completely serious, Mr. Cunningham. What would you want for it? Well, let me think. The lake is 20 acres. The land around it, which I also own, is another 15 acres. That's 35 acres total. It's prime real estate, lakefront property. In today's market, I'd say $500,000 would be fair. $500,000. My heart was pounding. That was a lot of money, more than I'd ever spent on anything except my house. But I'd been saving carefully for years, and I had a substantial retirement fund. Plus, Linda's life insurance policy had paid out nearly $400,000. I could actually afford this. Deal, I said. Harold seemed surprised. Are you sure? That's a big decision to make on the spot. I'm sure. When can we make this official? Well, you'll need a lawyer to draw up the paperwork. I can have my attorney contact you. Give me your information, and we'll get the ball rolling. I gave him my email address and phone number. We talked for a few more minutes about the logistics, and then I thanked him and hung up. I sat back in my chair, my mind racing. I'd just agreed to spend $500,000 on a lake. It was completely insane. But the more I thought about it, the more right it felt. This wasn't just about avoiding a fine or getting revenge on Karen. This was about taking control of something I loved, something that had given me peace and purpose for over 2 decades. Over the next 3 weeks, the paperwork moved surprisingly quickly. Harold's attorney was efficient and professional. I hired my own lawyer to review everything. There were surveys, inspections, title searches, and mountains of documents to sign. But by mid-May, it was done. Crystal Lake was mine. The day after the sale closed, I went to the HOA office. Barbara was there, as usual, working at her desk. Michael, she said when I walked in, I assume you're here about the fine. Actually, yes. I pulled out a folder and handed it to her. I thought you should see this. Barbara opened the folder and began reading. Her eyes widened. She looked up at me, then back down at the documents, then up at me again. You bought the lake? Every square inch of it. 20 acres of water. 15 acres of surrounding land. It's all mine now. Barbara started laughing. She laughed so hard that tears came to her eyes. Michael Torres, you are something else. You bought an entire lake to avoid a $600 fine. I prefer to think of it as a long-term investment in my happiness. She shook her head, still smiling. Well, I suppose this means the fine is void. You can't be fined for fishing in your own lake. Exactly. Have you told Karen yet? Not yet, but I have a feeling she's about to find out. As if on cue, the door to the HOA office burst open. Karen Henderson stormed in, her face red with indignation. Barbara, I need to report another violation. I saw Michael Torres fishing on the lake again this morning, and he still hasn't paid his fine or gotten a permit." She was so worked up that she didn't even notice I was standing right there. I cleared my throat. Karen whirled around, seeing me for the first time. Her expression of triumph immediately shifted to confusion. "Hello, Karen," I said pleasantly. "What are you doing here?" she demanded. "You're supposed to be paying your fine." "Actually, Karen, I won't be paying that fine. You see, I don't need a permit to fish on Crystal Lake anymore." "Of course you need a permit. The HOA passed that rule specifically to—" She stopped abruptly, realizing she'd almost said too much. "To target me?" I finished for her. "Yes, I know, but here's the thing, Karen. HOA rules only apply to HOA members and common property. Crystal Lake isn't common property anymore." Karen looked confused. "What are you talking about?" I pulled out my copy of the deed and held it up. "I'm talking about the fact that as of last Thursday, I am the sole owner of Crystal Lake. All 20 acres of it, and the 15 acres of land around it. It's my property now." Karen's mouth fell open. She stood there, frozen, unable to speak. Her face went from red to white to red again. You can't. That's impossible, ... single. She stammered. "It's very possible, and it's very legal. Barbara has all the documentation, if you'd like to review it." Karen turned to Barbara, her eyes pleading. "Barbara, tell him he can't do this. Tell him." Barbara held up her hands. "Karen, it's done. Michael legally purchased the lake from Harold Cunningham. There's nothing I can do about it, and frankly, there's no reason I should. He's within his rights." But what about the HOA rules?" "What about? The HOA has no jurisdiction over private property that isn't part of the common areas," Barbara explained patiently. "Michael owns the lake. He can do whatever he wants with it." Kara looked at me with pure hatred in her eyes. "This isn't over," she hissed. Then she turned and stormed out of the office, slamming the door behind her so hard that a picture on the wall rattled. Barbara and I looked at each other. She was trying not to smile. "I probably shouldn't say this as HOA president," Barbara said, "but that was the most satisfying thing I've seen in years. Karen has been a thorn in my side ever since she moved here. Well, she's not going to stop." "You heard her," she said. "This isn't over." Barbara's smile faded. "Be careful, Michael. Karen is vindictive. She's going to try to find some way to make your life difficult. Let her try. I own the lake now. What's she going to do about it?" But as I walked out of the HOA office that day, I had no idea just how far Karen would be willing to go. Would you have bought the lake? What would you do in Michael's situation? Drop your thoughts in the comments. For exactly 3 days after I became the proud owner of Crystal Lake, life was peaceful. I went fishing every morning at 6 o'clock, just like I always had, except now I did it with a smile on my face, knowing that no one could find me, regulate me, or tell me I needed a permit. The water was mine. The fish were mine. The peace was mine. But on the 4th day, everything changed. I woke up that Thursday morning to the sound of someone pounding on my front door. The clock on my nightstand read 5:40. Who the hell was at my door before 6 in the morning? I threw on a robe and stumbled downstairs. Through the peephole, I saw a man in a uniformed county sheriff's department. My heart immediately started racing. Had something happened to Emma or the kids? I opened the door. The officer was young, maybe 30 years old, with a serious expression on his face. "Michael Torres?" he asked. "Yes, that's me." "Is everything okay?" "Is my family?" "Your family is fine, sir. I'm here about a noise complaint. We received a call about loud disturbances coming from this property at approximately 5:30 this morning." I stared at him in disbelief. "A noise complaint? Officer, I was asleep until you knocked on my door. I haven't made any noise." The officer looked skeptical. "The caller claimed you were operating loud machinery or equipment." Are you sure you haven't been using any power tools or at 5:30 in the morning? Absolutely not. Who made this complaint? I'm not at liberty to say, sir, but if you're certain there's been no disturbance, I'll note that in my report. After the officer left, I stood in my doorway, fuming. I knew exactly who had made that call. Karen. The next morning, Friday, it happened again. This time the sheriff's deputy arrived at 5:55, claiming someone reported seeing smoke coming from my property and was concerned about a possible fire. There was no smoke. There was no fire. There was just Karen Henderson sitting in her house 4 doors down, making false reports to harass me. On Saturday morning, I decided to outsmart her. I set up a camera on my front porch, one of those doorbell cameras with motion detection and recording capabilities. If Karen was going to play dirty, I was going to have evidence. Sure enough, at 6:05 that morning, another sheriff's deputy knocked on my door. This time the complaint was about an alleged altercation and shouting. The camera captured everything: me opening the door in my pajamas, clearly having just woken up, with no evidence of any disturbance whatsoever. "Officer," I said, showing him my phone with the camera footage, "this is the 3rd false complaint in 3 days. I have proof that I've been asleep when these calls were made. Someone is deliberately harassing me, and I think I know who." The officer looked at the footage and nodded. "I understand your frustration, Mr. Torres. File a formal complaint with the department. If these false reports continue, we can take action against the caller." I filed a complaint that same day, but Karen wasn't done. The following week, I received a letter from the county health department. Someone had reported that my property was creating a public health hazard due to alleged standing water and mosquito breeding grounds. An inspector would be coming to evaluate this situation. When the inspector arrived on Wednesday afternoon, I showed him around my property. Everything was clean, well-maintained, and properly drained. The only standing water was Crystal Lake, which was a natural body of water, not a health hazard. Mr. M.F. Torres, your property is in excellent condition, the inspector said, making notes on his clipboard. "I see no health violations whatsoever. In fact, your yard is one of the cleanest I've inspected this month. I don't know who filed this complaint, but it was baseless." "I know who filed it," I said, "and I can prove it's part of a harassment campaign." That evening, I went to see Barbara at her home. She lived in a modest 2-story house, about 6 blocks from the lake. When she opened the door, she looked tired. "Michael," she said, gesturing for me to come in. "I had a feeling you'd be stopping by. Come in, please. Can I get you some coffee?" We sat in her living room, and I told her everything: the false police reports, the health department complaint, all of it. Barbara listened, her expression growing more concerned with each detail. "I've been getting complaints too," Barbara said quietly. "Karen has filed 7 formal complaints with the HOA in the past week. She claims you're violating property boundaries, operating a business without approval, disturbing the peace, and about 4 other things. I've investigated every single one, and they're all completely false." "Why is she doing this?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Because you humiliated her," Barbara said. "In Karen's mind, she created that fishing permit rule to punish you, and you turned it around on her by buying the lake. She can't stand being outsmarted. Now she's trying to make your life so miserable that you'll want to leave Pine Valley." "I'm not leaving. Premedicide firmly. This is my home. I've lived here for 23 years. I'm not going to let Karen Henderson drive me away." Barbara smiled. "Good. Because I have an idea that might help." She explained that the HOA bylaws included provisions for removing board members who engaged in harassment or abuse of power. If enough residents filed formal complaints against Karen, the board could vote to remove her from her position. She was the secretary of the HOA board. "But here's the thing," Barbara continued. "It takes 5 complaints from 5 different residents to trigger a review. And people are afraid of Karen. She's vindictive, and everyone knows it. No one wants to be her next target. So what do? We find people she's already targeted. People who have nothing left to lose. because they're already dealing with her harassment. You'd be surprised how many residents have complaints about Karen that they've never formally reported. Over the next 2 weeks, Barbara and I quietly reached out to other Pine Valley residents. What we discovered was shocking. Karen had been terrorizing the neighborhood for years. There was Margaret Chun, an elderly widow who lived alone. Karen had filed 12 complaints against her over the past year, claiming her lawn was unkempt even, though Margaret paid a lawn service to maintain it weekly. The stress had caused Margaret's blood pressure to spike, and her doctor had put her on medication. There was David Rodriguez, a single father of 2 young boys. Karen had complained that his children made too much noise playing in their backyard. She'd called the police on them 3 times, claiming they were disturbing the peace by playing basketball at 3 in the afternoon on a Saturday. There was Jennifer Walsh, a nurse who worked night shifts at the hospital. Karen had reported her multiple times for having her car in the driveway during the day because, apparently, Karen thought only unemployed people had cars parked during business hours. The list went on and on. Karen had made enemies all over Pine Valley, but everyone had suffered in silence, afraid that fighting back would only make things worse. But now, with my encouragement and Barbara's support, people were ready to speak up. We collected 8 formal complaints, more than enough to trigger a board review. Barbara scheduled a special HOA meeting for the first Thursday of June. According to the bylaw, Karen had to be notified of the complaints and given an opportunity to respond. When Karen received the notification, she was furious. She showed up at Barbara's house that same evening, shouting on the front porch loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "This is Michael Torres's doing," she screamed. "He's turning everyone against me. This is a witch hunt." Barbara, to her credit, remained calm. "Karen, these are legitimate complaints from multiple residents. The board is obligated to investigate. You'll have a chance to present your side at the meeting. My side is that I'm the only one in this neighborhood who cares about maintaining standards. Everyone else is too lazy or too stupid to follow the rules. Karen, I'm going to ask you to leave now. If you continue to harass me on my own property, I'll have no choice but to call the police." Karen left, but not before kicking over a flower pot on Barbara's porch and screaming one final threat. "You're all going to regret this." The night before the HOA meeting, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what Karen might do. She was cornered now, and cornered animals were dangerous, but I also felt hopeful. For the first time since this whole mess started, I felt like justice might actually prevail. The meeting was scheduled for 7 o'clock on Thursday evening at the community center. I arrived at 6:45, and the parking lot was already packed. Word had spread throughout Pine Valley. This was going to be the most attended HOA meeting in the neighborhood's history. Inside, the community center's main room was set up with rows of folding chairs. Every seat was taken, and people were standing along the walls. I estimated there were at least 120 residents. They're about a third of the entire neighborhood. Barbara sat at a table at the front of the room with the other 6 board members. Karen was already there, sitting in the front row with her arms crossed and her face set in a scowl. Her husband Gerald sat beside her, looking miserable and uncomfortable. At precisely 7 o'clock, Barbara called the meeting to order. "Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. As you know, we've received multiple formal complaints regarding the conduct of one of our board members, Karen Henderson. Tonight, we'll hear from the complainants, give Mrs. Henderson an opportunity to respond, and then the board will vote on whether further action is warranted." One by one, residents stood up and told their stories. Margaret Chun described the stress and health problems caused by Karen's constant complaints. David Rodriguez talked about his children crying because they were afraid to play in their own yard. Jennifer Walsh explained how Karen's harassment had made her dread coming home after exhausting night shifts at the hospital. The room was completely silent, except for the voices of the speakers. Several people were wiping away tears. Even some of the board members looked visibly moved. When it was my turn, I kept it brief. I described the fishing permit incident, Karen's campaign of false reports to the sheriff and health department, and the pattern of targeted harassment. I had documentation for everything Polizzi reports, inspector statements, timestamps from my security camera. Finally, It was Karen's turn to respond. She stood up, her face flushed with anger. "Everything I've done has been to maintain the quality and standards of this neighborhood," she shouted. "These people are just upset because I hold them accountable. If we don't enforce rules, Pine Valley will turn into a slum." I refuse to apologize for caring about property values. "Mrs. Henderson," Barbara interrupted, "can you address the specific allegations? Did you file false police reports against Mr. Torres?" "I reported what I observed. Did you or did you not make calls to the sheriff's department claiming Mr. Torres was making loud noises at 5:30 in the morning when his security camera proves he was asleep?" Karen's face went pale. She looked around the room, realizing that everyone was staring at her, waiting for an answer. I may have been mistaken about the timing 3 mornings in a row," Barbara pressed. "You were mistaken 3 mornings in a row." Karen sat down abruptly, her hands shaking. Barbara addressed the board. "Based on the testimony we've heard tonight and the documentation provided, I move that we vote on whether Karen Henderson should be removed from her position as secretary of the HOA board for conduct unbecoming of a board member and engaging in harassment of fellow residents." The vote was 6-0. Karen was removed from the board effective immediately. The room erupted in applause. Karen stood up, her face twisted with rage and humiliation. "This isn't over," she screamed. "You haven't seen the last of me. I'll sue every single one of you." Her husband Gerald gently took her arm and led her out of the room. The doors swung shut behind them, and for a moment everyone sat in stunned silence. Then someone started clapping, then another person. Within seconds, the entire room was on its feet, applauding. Several people came up to shake my hand and thank me for having the courage to stand up to Karen. Barbara walked over to me, smiling. "Well, Michael, I think you can finally enjoy your lake in peace." "I hope so," I said. "But something tells me Karen meant what she said. This might not be over yet." I had no idea how right I was. Did Karen deserve to be removed from the board? What would you have done? Share your thoughts below. 2 weeks after Karen was removed from the HOA board, I received a thick envelope via certified mail. My hands were shaking as I signed for it, because I knew exactly what it was before I even opened it. Karen was suing me. The lawsuit was 37 pages long, filled with legal jargon and accusations. According to Karen's attorney, I had engaged in conspiracy to defame, intentional infliction of emotional distress, interference with business relations, and about 10 other charges I could barely pronounce. She was seeking damages of $250,000. I immediately called my attorney, Robert Chuno, relation to Margaret Chun, though he'd heard about the HOA drama and thought it was hilarious. Robert had handled my lake purchase, and he was good at what he did. "Michael," he said after reviewing the lawsuit, "this is what we call ASLAPP, Suit Strategic Lawsuit Against Public Participation. It's designed to intimidate you and drain your resources. The good news is that most of these claims are completely frivolous. The bad news is that defending against them will still cost time and money." "How much money?" "Probably $15,000 to $20,000 in legal fees, assuming it doesn't go to trial. If it does go to trial, we're looking at $50,000 or more." I felt sick. Karen was going to bleed me dry even if she didn't win. "However," Robert continued, "I have an idea. Give me a week to do some research." That week felt like the longest of my life. I couldn't fish. I couldn't relax. Every time I looked at Crystal Lake, all I could think about was the lawsuit and the money I was going to have to spend defending myself. Emma called me from Colorado. She'd heard about the lawsuit through the neighborhood grapevine apparently. News traveled fast in Pine Valley. "Dad, are you okay?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. "I'm fine, honey. It's just Karen being Karen. My attorney says we'll be okay." "Do you need money?" "Mark and I can help." "No, absolutely not. You have Jake and Tyler to think about. I'll handle this. But as I hung up the phone, I wondered if I really could handle it. Maybe I should have just paid the $600 fine and gotten the stupid fishing permit. Maybe buying the lake had been a huge mistake. 7 days after our first conversation, Robert called me back. His voice sounded excited. "Michael, I found something interesting. Do you remember when Karen filed all those complaints with the health department and the sheriff's office? How could I forget? Well, I did some digging. In our state, filing false reports with law enforcement is a misdemeanor, and making false reports to government agencies like the health department can result in civil penalties. I contacted the county prosecutor's office and the health department with your documentation, the police reports, the inspector's statement, your security camera footage, and they're very interested. The prosecutor is considering charging Karen with filing false police reports, and the health department is looking at fining her for wasting their resources. More importantly, if Karen is charged criminally, it completely undermines her civil lawsuit against you." For the first time in weeks, I felt hope. "There's more," Robert continued. "I also filed a motion to dismiss Karen's lawsuit under our state's anti-SLAPP statute. This law protects people who speak out on matters of public concern, which your testimony at the HOA meeting definitely qualifies as. If the judge grants our motion, Karen will have to pay your legal fees. She'd have to pay my fees. Every penny. That's how anti-SLAPP laws work. They're designed to punish people who use lawsuits to silence critics." I could have kissed him. "Robert, you're a genius. I'm just doing my job. Now, there's one more thing you should know. The HOA received something interesting yesterday." Karen filed a lawsuit against the HOA too. She's suing them for wrongful termination from the board, seeking $100,000 in damages. Can she do that? She can try. But it's a losing case. The HOA bylaws clearly allow for removal of board members for cause, and there was overwhelming documentation of her harassment. Barbara called me this morning. The HOA wants to coordinate their defense with yours. Karen is fighting a war on multiple fronts now, and she's going to lose every battle. 3 weeks later, I sat in a courtroom for the hearing on our motion to dismiss. Karen was there with her attorney, a slick-looking man in an expensive suit who kept checking his phone. Barbara was there too. Representing the HOA, the courtroom was packed with Pine Valley residents who'd come to watch. The judge was a woman in her early 60s named Judge Patricia Morrison. She had a reputation for being no-nonsense and hating frivolous lawsuits. Robert presented our case first. He walked the judge through the timeline: Karen's fishing permit rule, my purchase of the lake, her campaign of false reports, the HOA meeting where 8 residents testified against her, and finally, her retaliatory lawsuit. "Your Honor," Robert concluded, "this is a textbook SLAPP suit. Mrs. Henderson is using the courts to punish Mr. Torres for exercising his First Amendment right to speak at a public meeting. The anti-SLAPP statute exists precisely for cases like this." Karen's attorney stood up to respond. He argued that Karen had been publicly humiliated and that premeta they orchestrated a conspiracy to destroy her reputation. Judge Morrison interrupted him. "Counselor, I've reviewed the HOA meeting transcript. 8 different residents testified about Mrs. Henderson's behavior. Are you suggesting Mr. Torres somehow fabricated all of those testimonies?" "Well, no, but... and I also have the police reports and health department records showing that Mrs. Henderson filed false complaints against Mr. Torres. Is that correct?" The attorney shifted uncomfortably. "The police reports are disputed. They're disputed by whom? Mr. Torres's security camera footage showing he was asleep when these complaints were made. Does your client have any evidence to contradict that?" Silence. Judge Morrison leaned back in her chair. "I've seen enough. This lawsuit is clearly retaliatory in nature. The defendant's motion to dismiss is granted under the anti-SLAPP statute. Furthermore, Mrs. Henderson, you are ordered to pay Mr. Torres's attorney fees, which she glanced at the paperwork, currently total $18,500. If you had waited to file this lawsuit, that number would have been much lower. Consider that a lesson in impulse control." Karen's face turned purple. She started to stand up, but her attorney grabbed her arm and pulled her back down. Additionally, the judge continued, I'm referring this case to the county prosecutor's office with a recommendation that they investigate Mrs. Henderson for filing false police reports. Court is adjourned. The gavel came down with a sharp crack. The courtroom erupted in applause. Judge Morrison banged her gavel again. Order. This is still a courtroom. But she was smiling. Karen stormed out of the courtroom without looking at anyone. Her attorney followed, already on his phone, probably calling another client who could actually pay him. Robert shook my hand. Congratulations, Michael. That went even better than I expected. Barbara came over and hugged me. Justice prevails, she said, laughing. Several Pine Valley residents congratulated me as we left the courthouse. Margaret Chun had tears in her eyes. Thank you, she kept saying. Thank you for standing up to her when the rest of us were too afraid. That evening, I went fishing for the first time in a month. The sun was setting over Crystal Lake, painting the water in shades of gold and crimson. I cast my line and settled back in my boat, feeling more at peace than I had in weeks. The legal battle wasn't completely over. Karen's lawsuit against the HOA was still pending, and the prosecutor's investigation was ongoing. But I had won the most important fight. I had defended my home, my rights, and my lake. 2 weeks later, I received another piece of good news. The county prosecutor had decided to charge Karen with 3 counts of filing false police reports. Each count was a misdemeanor, carrying a potential fine of up to $1,000 and up to 6 months in jail. Karen pleaded guilty to avoid jail time. She was ordered to pay $3,000 in fines, perform 100 hours of community service, and issue written apologies to me and to the sheriff's department. The health department also fined her $1,500 for filing a false complaint, and Karen's lawsuit against them was dismissed within 60 days. The judge ruled that the HOA had followed proper procedures and had more than sufficient cause to remove her from the board. Karen and Gerald put their house on the market 3 months later. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that they were moving to Florida to be closer to their daughter. I never spoke to Karen again. The day the moving truck pulled away from her house, I was out on my boat, fishing in my lake. But that's not the end of the story, because owning a lake brought unexpected challenges and opportunities that I never could have imagined. About 6 months after Karen left Pine Valley, Barbara came to visit me one Saturday morning. I was on my dock, preparing my fishing gear for a morning on the water. Michael, can we talk? She asked. Of course. Want some coffee? We sat on my back porch, overlooking the lake. Barbara looked nervous, which wasn't like her. I have something to ask you, and I hope you'll consider it carefully, she began. The HOA has been getting requests from residents. A lot of people want to use the lake not just for fishing, but for kayaking, paddleboarding, even swimming. Right now, legally, they can't. You own the lake, so it's private property. I nodded. I'd been thinking about this myself. What are you suggesting? What if we worked out some kind of agreement? You could grant limited access to Pine Valley residents, maybe certain hours, certain activities, basic rules to keep things safe and respectful. In return, the HOA could help with maintenance costs, liability insurance, things like that. I thought about it. When I'd bought the lake, I'd been thinking only about protecting my right to fish. But now, sitting here looking at this beautiful body of water, I realized something. This lake had given me so much joy over the years. Why shouldn't others be able to enjoy it too? Let's do it, I said. But I have some conditions. No motorized boats except for mine. No fishing without my permission. And certain hours are reserved just for me, early mornings, especially. Barbara smiled. I think that's more than fair. And that's how the Crystal Lake Community Access Program was born. But little did we know, this decision would lead to one final, unexpected confrontation. ... Would you have shared the lake with your neighbors? What rules would you set? Let us know in the comments. The Crystal Lake Community Access Program officially launched on the first Saturday of September, exactly 1 year after I'd bought the lake. Barbara and I had spent 2 months working out the details with the HOA board and my attorney. The agreement was fair, and comprehensive residents could use the lake for kayaking, paddleboarding, and swimming during designated hours. Fishing required my personal permission, which I granted to about a dozen serious anglers who I knew would respect the water. Early mornings, from 5 to 8, were reserved exclusively for me. The HOA contributed $5,000 annually toward liability insurance and agreed to handle all maintenance of the pathways around the lake. In return, I maintained the water quality, managed the fish population, and enforced the rules. It was a partnership that benefited everyone. On launch day, over 80 residents showed up at the lake with kayaks, paddleboards, and beach chairs. The weather was perfect sunny, 78 degrees, with a light breeze that created gentle ripples on the water. Barbara had organized a small ceremony with refreshments and a speech. "Today marks a new chapter for Pine Valley," Barbara said, standing on my dock with a microphone. "Thanks to Michael Torres's generosity, our community has access to this beautiful natural resource. This lake will bring us together, create memories for our children, and remind us of what makes Pine Valley special. Michael, would you like to say a few words?" I wasn't much for public speaking, but I stepped forward. When I bought this lake a year ago, I was angry and frustrated. I felt like I was being attacked for doing something I loved. But looking at all of you here today, I realize that the best revenge is an isolationites community. This lake belongs to all of us now. Enjoy it, respect it, and make some great memories. The crowd applauded. Kids immediately started jumping into the water, their laughter echoing across the lake. Parents launched kayaks and paddleboards. Margaret Chun, the elderly widow who Karen had tormented, sat in a beach chair with her feet in the water, a peaceful smile on her face. David Rodriguez's 2 boys, the ones Karen had called the police on for playing basketball, were throwing a football in the shallow end. David came over to thank me personally. "My kids talk about this lake every day," he said, shaking my hand. "You gave them their childhood back. Thank you." Jennifer Walsh, the nurse who worked night shifts, brought her elderly parents to the lake. They sat under an umbrella, watching their grandchildren swim. Jennifer pulled me aside. "This place has become my family's favorite spot," she said. "After a long shift at the hospital, I come here and sit by the water. It helps me decompress. You've created something really special, Michael." That evening, after everyone had gone home, I sat on my dock and watched the sunset. The lake was calm again, reflecting the orange and pink sky like a mirror. I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, not just peace, but purpose. This lake wasn't just mine anymore. It was ours. 2 weeks after the program launched, my daughter Emma called with exciting news. She and her family were coming to visit for Thanksgiving, and they wanted to stay for a whole week. "Dad, the boys keep asking about your lake," Emma said. "They've seen all the photos you've been posting online. They want to go fishing with their grandpa." My heart swelled. Jake was 10 now. Tyler was 12, and neither of them had ever been fishing before. Linda had always planned to bring them to the lake when they were old enough, but she'd passed away before we got the chance. Now, finally, I could teach my grandsons the same way my father had taught me. November came, and Emma's family arrived the day before Thanksgiving. The boys burst out of the car and immediately ran to see the lake. Their eyes went wide. "Grandpa, this is yours?" Tyler asked, his voice filled with awe. "Well, technically yes," I said, ruffling his hair. "But really, it belongs to everyone who loves it. Come on, let me show you around." We spent that week making memories. I taught Jake and Tyler how to bait a hook, how to cast a line, how to be patient and quiet while waiting for a bite. Tyler caught his first fish on the 3rd day, a decent-sized bass that made him shriek with excitement. Jake caught 2 smaller ones, but he was just as thrilled. Emma sat on the dock with us, taking pictures and laughing at the boys' enthusiasm. On Thanksgiving morning, before the rest of the neighborhood woke up, just the 4 of us went out in my boat. The lake was perfectly still, and the sunrise was spectacular. "Dad," Emma said quietly, "Mom would have loved this." I felt tears prick my eyes. She always wanted the boys to love fishing as much as I do. "I think you made that happen," Emma said, squeezing my hand. Winter arrived, and the lake took on a different beauty. The water was too cold for swimming, but people still came to walk the paths, feed the ducks, and enjoy the peaceful scenery. I continued my morning fishing routine, often in temperatures that would have kept most people inside. But there was something magical about fishing in the winter, the crisp air, the steam rising from my coffee, the absolute solitude. In January, Barbara approached me with another proposal. The HOA wanted to build a small pavilion near the lake, just a covered area with picnic tables where families could gather. They would pay for everything and handle all the permits. I agreed immediately. By March, the pavilion was complete. It was a beautiful wooden structure with a shingled roof, 6 picnic tables, and even some electrical outlets for people who wanted to bring music or lights. The HOA planted flowers around it and installed a small bulletin board where residents could post notices about community events. The pavilion quickly became the heart of Pine Valley's social life. Families held birthday parties there. The book club started meeting there every Tuesday evening. A group of retirees began playing cards there every Thursday afternoon. The lake, which I'd bought out of spite and stubbornness, had transformed into something much bigger than my original petty victory over Karen Henderson. Then, in late April, almost exactly 2 years after I'd bought the lake, I received an unexpected letter. The return address was from Florida. My stomach tightened. I knew who it was from before I even opened it. Karen. The letter was handwritten, not typed. That surprised me. Karen's handwriting was neat and precise, just like everything else about her. "Dear Michael, I'm writing this letter because my therapist suggested it would help with my recovery. I've been in therapy since we moved to Florida, working on anger management and control issues. I'm not writing to ask for your forgiveness. I don't deserve that. But I need to apologize. You were right about everything. I was jealous of your house, your view, your peace. When you refused to sell to me, I became obsessed with making you as unhappy as I was. The fishing permit rule was specifically designed to hurt you. Everything that followed, the false reports, the lawsuit, it all came from a place of bitterness and spite. Moving to Florida has given me perspective. I've had time to reflect on the person I became in Pine Valley. I was toxic. I hurt innocent people because I couldn't control my own anger and insecurity. Margaret Chen, David Rodriguez, Jennifer Walsh did nothing wrong. You did nothing wrong. I was the problem. I heard through a mutual acquaintance that you opened the lake to the community. That's beautiful, Michael. You took something that started with conflict and turned it into something that brings people together. That's the opposite of everything I did. I don't expect you to respond to this letter. I don't expect anything from you. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry. You deserved better from me. And so did everyone else in Pine Valley. Karen Henderson and I sat with a letter for a long time, reading it multiple times. There was no hint of manipulation or hidden agenda. It was just a woman acknowledging her mistakes and trying to make amends. Part of me was skeptical. Could Karen really change? But another part of me recognized something important. Holding on to anger was exactly what had made Karen so miserable in the first place. I didn't want to become like her. I decided to write back. "Dear Karen, thank you for your letter. It took courage to write it, and I appreciate your honesty. What you did hurt a lot of people, including me. But I also understand that hurt people hurt people. I hope therapy is helping you find peace. You're right about the lake. It has brought the community together in ways I never imagined. Kids swim here every summer. Families have picnics by the water. People come here to relax, to connect, to heal. In a strange way, your actions set all of this in motion. If you hadn't pushed me with that fishing permit rule, I never would have bought the lake. And if I hadn't bought the lake, none of this would exist. I'm not saying I'm grateful for the harassment and the lawsuits, but I am grateful for where I ended up. Sometimes good things come from bad situations. I forgive you, Karen. I hope you can forgive yourself. Michael Torres. I mailed the letter the next day. I never heard back from Karen, and I didn't need to. The conversation was complete. That summer was the best one I could remember. The lake was constantly busy with happy families. I gave fishing lessons to 17 kids throughout June and July, teaching them everything my father had taught me. Several of them caught their first fish under my guidance, and the joy on their faces reminded me why I loved this place so much. In August, the HOA organized a Crystal Lake Appreciation Day with games, food, and a barbecue. Over 200 residents attended. Barbara gave a speech thanking me for my generosity, but I stopped her mid-speech. "Barbara, you don't need to thank me," I said. "This lake has given me more than I've given it. You've all made me feel like I'm part of something bigger than myself. That's the real gift." That evening, as the sun set and the party wound down, I found myself standing at the edge of the water with Barbara. We watched the last few families pack up their things and head home. "You know," Barbara said, "when you first told me you were buying this lake, I thought you were crazy." I laughed. I was crazy. I spent $500,000 out of spite. Maybe. But sometimes, the crazy decisions turn out to be the best ones. She paused. "Can I tell you something? Before all of this happened, I was thinking about stepping down as HOA president. The job was exhausting, and people like Karen made it unbearable. But watching what you did, standing up to her, fighting Buck, and then turning it into something positive, it inspired me. It reminded me why I took this job in the first place, to build community, to make Pine Valley a place where people want to live." "You've done that, Barbara. This place is special because of you." She smiled. "We did it together." That night, I had trouble sleeping. My mind kept replaying the past 2 years. The conflict, the lawsuit, the resolution. I thought about Karen in Florida, hopefully finding peace. I thought about Barbara and all the residents who had stood by me. I thought about Emma and my grandsons, creating memories at the lake, and I thought about Linda. I wished she could see what this place had become, but in a way, I think she knew. She always told me that my stubbornness would either be my downfall or my salvation. In this case, it had been both. The next morning, I woke up at 5:30. Just like always, I made my coffee, grabbed my fishing rod, and headed down to my dock. The lake was perfectly still, reflecting the pink and orange sky. A family of ducks glided past, leaving gentle ripples in their wake. I pushed my boat away from the dock and rowed out to my favorite spot. As I cast my line into the water, I felt completely at peace. This was my lake, but it was also everyone's lake, and that made it even more special. 2 years ago, I'd been fined $600 for fishing. Today, I owned the lake, had brought a community together, and had created something that would outlast me. Not bad for a guy who just wanted to catch some fish. A few minutes later, I felt a tug on my line. I smiled, set my coffee down, and started reeling in whatever was on the other end. It didn't matter if it was big or small. The joy was in the moment, in the peace, in the knowledge that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. As the sun climbed higher in the sky and the lake began to wake up around me, I realized something profound. Karen had tried to take away my happiness, but instead, she'd given me something infinitely better. She'd given me a purpose, a community, and a legacy. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's living well, sharing generously, and turning conflict into connection. And as I sat in my boat on that beautiful morning, watching the sun rise over my lake hour, I knew that Linda would be proud. I'd taken the worst situation and turned it into the best outcome. That's what it means to truly win. What did you think of Michael's journey? Would you have done anything differently? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more amazing HOA drama stories. Thank you for watching.